right? I'm open. All right. So I'm going to have to kill a little time because Ed just got home from the vineyard. So he's taking a quick shower. He'll be joining us shortly, but I'm going to start without him. Because he'll be much more pleasant, clean than dirty. Anyway, so hello everybody. We've missed doing this. It's good to see so many people back. I'm going to start out with just a quick, like what's going on in the vineyard update. You guys, if you have your bubbles, you can start on them. We're going to get to that in a minute, but I thought I'd wait for Ed to get here before I start drinking. That would go over better. So vineyard update. I think the last happy hour we did was in June, maybe. So it's been a while. This has been, so far it's been a great season for us. So it's always hard to know this early on, like what the year is going to be like. We always say that you can kind of have bad news at this point, but not necessarily good news. But every day that goes by as the weather cooperates, the more that we can feel like we can probably have good news. So that's great. It has been a very dry summer. We've just the last couple of days gotten a bunch of big storms, which throughout the summer, you know, our house is down in Silver Spring and the farm's in Mount Airy, and there have been a bunch of thunderstorms that have blown through and that have given us a lot of rain here in Silver Spring that have not hit Black Ankle. Luckily, a few of those did hit Live Edge where we have baby vines and we actually want rain, so that has been good. But we were actually out watering. The last couple of weeks, we had to water some of the young vines because it's been super dry. So that is good news for the old vines. It's a little tougher on the young vines. It's doable, but it's really slow. I mean, we water them by hand. We don't have irrigation installed. So to water them, we fill up a giant like water tank that we would usually use for spraying. And we have a special hose and we literally like just drive along slowly and open the hose, put a couple gallons, go to the next plant, put a couple gallons. So slow going when you're doing thousands of vines that way. But the last couple days we've gotten a few inches of rain, but big storms. So they've kind of come down hard and fast, but that's enough to get the soil wet again. It's enough to give a little boost to the baby vines, and not so much that we're concerned about it as far as fruit or anything else. The fruit is just starting to go through veraison, which many of you probably know, but that just means it's when kind of oh, he's here. Here comes my guest star. Come on in. I'll clean up.
The seat taken?
The seat's not. I know. We're talking about the vineyard update, which you were just there. You could probably tell. But
yeah.
I was just saying everything's going through veraison, just starting. So it's kind of the first step of ripening. So it's most evident in the reds. And if you come to the vineyard right now, it's most evident as you look to your right, as you drive in, where the Syrah is. That little kind of island between the two driveways is all Syrah. And you'll see some of the grapes start to change color. So veraison is just when you start to see a color change in the grapes and the fruit starts to soften a little bit. So I was just up checking out some of the whites yesterday with an eye towards when we're going to make our bubbles and how soon we'll be ready to pick. We're going to talk about all that in a minute. And most of the whites, the color change hadn't started. The color change is much less dramatic in whites, as you might imagine. They go from green to kind of yellow, but you can definitely see it when it starts. It's not so bright as the reds, but they were starting to get a little bit soft. So that's kind of step one. So that is kind of what's going on. So
that's first step of ripening. That happens every year. There's no relationship apparently between when they change color and when they're going to be picked.
Right.
At least that's what we've heard, and we've never noticed one ourselves. But so when I was out scouting today, other than looking for issues and problems, which we don't really have, other than morning glory deciding to go nuts and grow everywhere.
Right.
But is two things. You want this is the time of year where we want the vines to stop growing leaves and shoots and start putting all their effort into the fruit, and then ripening the wood. It's called for the winter. So they survive through the winter fine. So the two signs I'm out there looking for are is there new growth at the end of the shoots, which we don't want this time of year. So you can see it if you go through the vineyard, you see sometimes these little, they're called tendrils, these little little skinny little things coming out of the end. They come out where near the growing tip. And if they're very long and out past the last leaf, that means the shoot is still growing, and it's searching. Those tendrils move around and they try to find something to grasp onto. A vine is a climber. If that tendril is very short, that means the vine has stopped putting much energy into growing and has started to put all its energy into the fruit. So that's a really good thing, and that's a sign we're looking for.
I don't know how well you can see it, but here's, I just took some pictures of it. I think these are on our Instagram, or maybe going to be, but he's talking about this little hair coming out. That's the vine tendril. Anyway, so that's one of the things we look at, is where that is. Yeah.
And then we want to start, once that happens, then you start seeing the shoots start to turn brown from the bottom up. There's this lignifying, I think is the word that growers use. And that means that, again, it's starting to prepare for the winter. It's putting its effort into preparing for the winter and ripening its fruit instead of growing. And that is very different by variety. I didn't get into any of the Cab Franc blocks today, which is often the first one to start lignifying up. So I won't know that till tomorrow. But anyway, it's nice.
It's very early for that to be.
Yeah. It's the first few clues of giving us a sense of when we might be picking. So
right.
And how good a year it's going to be. The earlier they stop growing, right around that. We don't want them to stop growing before this, but the closer we can get to exactly right now, usually the more ripe they get.
Right. So we look at that tendril throughout the growing season early on. If that tendril starts to be below the first leaf too early, that is an indication that the vines don't have enough water. So that when I said we were out watering the young vines, that's how they tell us that they're thirsty, because they're kind of slowing down on their growing. Once the ripening, like this veraison period starts, where we start to see some color in the fruit, then we don't mind if they're a little thirsty. So, and it's not even such an indication that, it just means that they've kind of like moved on to the next phase. So for the young shoots, we're going to look for tendrils out a lot later for the young vines rather, that aren't going to produce fruit this year, we're going to look for those tendrils to be a lot longer than for the ones that are going to bear fruit. So.
And Sam, I saw that comment well into harvest down in South Texas.
Yeah, I bet.
Wow. Wouldn't that be nice? We were harvesting already.
I don't know. They must start earlier, right?
Once you pick, you don't have to worry about the weather anymore. That's great.
I know.
Oh, well, I'm jealous. But, it's fine. We're happy. So.
Oh, I finally opened comments, so I see hey, how can you open the bottle? I'm going to go try. If you watched I think it was Instagram, Facebook, I never remember which one, but there are lots of outtakes of, Alejandra, who just became a U.S. citizen, was like trying to toast herself with a bottle of Chispa, and it took about 10 tries to get the bottle open, but she did win in the end. So I'm going to, here's Chispa bottle sample. I'm going to actually go open another one because I have one of the old ones.
Yeah, okay. You said we're not allowed to open one of the new ones. No. Yeah. Melissa and Zoe and everybody else won't let us. We don't get an allocation of this wine. There's not enough of it. So we have a few bottles left of the experimental ones that still have the yeast in them. And
well, this is the first one we actually went down with our friend.
Oh yeah.
Who was anonymous because he doesn't want anyone else to ask him to help disgorge. But who helped us do them? And we did one batch. So this is basically the exact same wine. We did one batch. He just did a case for us when we kind of helped him and then figured out the process. But it was bottled at a slightly different time than the rest. So we don't really feel like we can sell it. We feel like we better drink it off. So that's how we get our allocation. All right, let's see if I can open it. Dun, dun, dun. It's pretty tight. Yeah. Oh, this is going to happen.
This is the gun show. The Sarah gun show.
Woo! Ta-da! Piece of cake. You just have to twist. It's all about twist.
Yeah. I was told once to twist the bottle and hold the cork. I don't know why that is, but somebody said, yeah, the correct way is to hold the cork still and twist the bottle. There you go.
Yeah, there you go. That's for you. Lovely. All right, so our agenda for today is to talk about Chispa, but what do you need? Oh, he wants to get the other glasses. Mostly just to talk about all about bubbles and different kinds of bubbly wine. So I feel like the world of bubbles is sometimes a little mysterious. Because there's champagne, and then there's method champenoise, which is basically champagne but not made in Champagne. I shouldn't say that, but basically. And then there are lots of other kinds of wine that are also bubbly. So you might have a cava or a prosecco. Asti Spumanti, like what are the other big categories?
Cremant.
Cremant. And all of those things are, if you know what they're saying, are giving you a little clue about what's in the bottle or how it was made. So I think I will start with Champagne, which is actual Champagne is a region in France, within Burgundy, right? It's inside of Burgundy or the edge of Burgundy. And so if you have a true bottle of Champagne, it has to be grown in that specific region of France. And it can only be made of one of 3 grapes or some combination of those. So Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, or Pinot Meunier. It's just those 3, right? There's nobody else. Pinot Noir, as you probably know, is a red grape, and so is Pinot Meunier, actually. So although I think most of us think of Champagne as looking like this, a lot of it is made from grapes that started out red. You will often see on the bottle, it will say Blanc de Blanc, just B-L-A-N-C, and then D-E-B-L-A-N-C, which just means white from white. That means that it was Chardonnay that went into the bottle. If you see Blanc de Noir, that means white from reds or from blacks, but the French call what we call red grapes, they call black grapes. They're really purple, so neither one of us is right, but whatever. It really doesn't make any difference. That means that it was white wine, so it looks white when you're drinking it, but it was made from one of those red varieties. And I don't think you can tell which one. I think there isn't that much Pinot Meunier, right? Isn't that kind of a rare one to find? Relatively.
I think less so,
it's less, but you don't know. It's one of the reds. Yeah. Or they say nothing. Sometimes they don't say anything, but those are kind of some hints about what's going on. You can impress your friends with your intimate knowledge of the weed, the Champagne. And then the way that you end up with a white wine, even though so many of the grapes can be red, is that a Champagne, the pressing for Champagne is very special. So the presses tend to be, especially the old presses, very, very wide and very shallow, so that the grapes are pressed just a short way and the juice does not have a lot of time to go past the skins. So it doesn't really pick up much color. If you see a rosé Champagne, which are lovely, or can be, often what they'll do is they'll let the juice sit on the skins for a little bit of time. It'll pick up a little bit of flavor and then and a little bit of color, and that's how you get pink Champagne, which somehow sounds pink Champagne sounds like a Vegas act, but rosé Champagne sounds very sophisticated. So I don't know, they're the same thing, but that's how it works. So that's where the pink comes from. So again, traditionally, Champagnes are all made basically the same way, which is you pick the grapes very early when they're very unripe, or what we would think of as unripe. If you made a table wine from them, it would be very, very low alcohol and quite acidic. And the idea is that a lot of the kind of more interesting flavors that you're going to get in a riper wine are not going to have developed yet. You're going to have a kind of simple base wine. And then the interest is going to come from time with yeast and the aging process. That's where a lot of the classic Champagne flavors come from, rather than from the fruit itself. So they want a wine that starts relatively simple. And it will be picked at like 10 to 12% sugar, right? It's pretty low that people will pick.
No, 16 or 16.
Oh, no, sorry, 10%. No, I'm thinking what the alcohols would be. Sorry. So, yeah, 16 to 18. So maybe 4 or 5% less sugar than we would think of. We don't pick so much just on the sugar levels, but then it would be more typical for a still wine. And then the fruit is brought in, it's pressed in this very shallow press, so it has very little contact with the juice with the skin, goes into tank, and then it is fermented until it is completely dry. So there's no sugar left. And then it's bottled, and it's bottled in a bottle like this, bottled in its final bottle, but with a crown cap on it, like a beer cap, basically. Oh, but first, you can't just bottle it. First, you have to do the tirage before you put it in the bottle. So it gets totally dry. And then you take the crown cap off because you shouldn't have put it on yet because you forgot to add. Oh, I forgot. Anyway. So what they really do is they put what they call it's called tirage, I think is the term. And it's a little tiny bit of sugar and a little bit of yeast. And those are put in the bottle, and they're very carefully calculated so that you're going to decide exactly how much more alcohol you're going to add, and then how much more fermentation you're going to get. So what is your pressure going to be? What is your final pressure going to be on the wine? And then, so then you put the crown cap on, and then it sits, and it goes through what the second fermentation in the bottle. And that's kind of like a fancy calculation to figure out what you want that to be. And then that second fermentation goes on in the bottle, and you have, and then you tend to let the wine sit for a while, maybe a couple of years on that yeast from the second fermentation. And then you go through a process which is called riddling. So ultimately you have the bottle, it's probably rested like this, and you have these little yeast who have been working all inside the bottle, but you don't want like a big dirty spot on the bottom of the bottle. So you have to go through and you have to turn the bottles every once in a while. And now there are machines that do it, but in the old days they had people who came in and they would just coat thousands of bottles. They just turn each one a quarter turn. They come in at the end of the workday, and that was kind of like a traditional job throughout the winter, because you want to turn just a little bit every day, so the yeast is still active and in there, but doesn't have time to stick to the side of the bottle. And then very slowly, as you're turning, you want to get the yeast to the neck of the bottle. So you kind of turn and there are special boards, if you want to do it by hand, that slowly tilt the bottle up. So you end up with your bottle like this, and all of the yeast comes and settles down into the neck. Do you want to take it from there? Or should I just keep going? Oh, okay.
So yeah, so you've got, imagine you've got
I gotta taste
all your wine here, and then all the little dirty yeast stuff is here. And usually it's maybe about that thick, I don't know. And
I think like
on the bottom, but you still have your crown cap on. So now you get to do the fun step of disgorging, which is the really kind of scary and crazy and kind of fun, the thing that we didn't know how to do and that we had our friend teach us how to do. And what happens is you've got it all around the yeast. You carefully lift the bottles up without, you don't want to do this because now all your yeast went away. Your yeast is down the bottom. You dip it into a brine. It can be glycol, can be liquid nitrogen, sometimes something really cold. And if you leave it in there for a minute or maybe two, it actually freezes the neck. So it'll freeze all of that that yeast. And once it's frozen, you can turn the bottle up, flip the crown cap off, and the pressure from the wine will shoot the yeast out, and it literally just flies out. You can't even see it when it flies out. You just take the cap off, and then bang, it's all gone, and along with some of the wine. So then you need to. Your next step is to go. Now you've got your yeast out, but your level is now down here. You've got to sacrifice some bottles to refill. So you're now going along and refilling the bottles quickly, very quickly before the bubbles go away, back up to the level they're supposed to be, and then the final cork and hood and things going on. That step, in between that step, is a step. Sarah talked about the tirage, the original that you put in amount of sugar and yeast to ferment the wine in the bottle. Sometimes there is a next step called the dosage, at which you add a little bit of sugar to try to balance the wine. And just about almost every sparkling wine in the world has some residual sugar in it. Yeah. There are a few, I think they're called natural or something, that the last few years have come out of champagne, especially, that are dry. But it's really rare, especially because there's so much acidity in that wine. And the bubbles make it taste even more acidic. Feels more acidic. You need a little bit of sugar to balance it out. So that's the dosage.
And so you also, another hint on the label, you'll see sometimes semi-sec, which means a little bit sweet. Actually means a little bit dry, but it means a little bit sweet.
Yes.
And then brewed.
That's quite sweet.
Which is quite sweet. It's, again, everything is, nothing is what it seems. So
extra dry.
Then there's extra dry.
Believe it or not,
it's usually written as brewed, right?
Well, there's semi-sec, which is very sweet, and then extra dry, which, believe it or not, is sweet.
Yeah.
Even it's called extra dry.
Yeah.
And then there's brut, which
is
still has a bunch of sugar.
Totally dry, but not.
But not.
And then there's extra brut, right? You have sometimes. I feel like you see
rare,
once in a while.
Sometimes, yeah. And then there's, I think, Natural, which has none. But I'm not even sure I've ever had one of those. They're quite rare. But so even the lowest sugar ones have sugar in them. It can be residual from your tirage, but that's really hit or miss. And you got to be really careful with that, because some yeasts in the bottle will be stronger for whatever reason and eat more sugar. So you might have bottle variation if you do it that way. If you're sure you want to put a little in, you got to do it through the dosage.
Yeah, yeah. So I would say that it's a brut, that it's dry. I mean, it's basically dry, but it's like a little bit less than 1% of residual sugar. I think it's 0.75 is what's our calculation.
Yeah, it's definitely a brut.
So it's considered dry again, but it's not quite. So that's it.
Yeah.
And then.
And so there's a couple other ways to make sparkling wines just quickly. Prosecco is really, Sarah loves Prosecco, and there's some wonderful Proseccos out there. We need to go explore some of those someday. But that is essentially, you bring in your white wine, you're going to let it hang a little longer and have a little more sugar in it.
Go back one
Yep.
Prosecco itself is a kind of grape. That's
all.
Oh,
yes.
That's all. Just I find these things confusing, so
Yeah,
I just want to know if I know them. So. It's a region, but it's also the name of the grape from that region in Italy. So I guess a Prosecco was always made in Italy, although I guess you could label it as the grape otherwise. We wanted to plant Prosecco because it's one of my favorites, and it's kind of a family favorite, but we couldn't get the grapes when we were planting originally. We couldn't find vines, so we have not planted any, but maybe someday. But anyway, so could continue, but I just think that's helpful to know. It's a region and a grape.
So if you're making Prosecco, you want to pick a little bit later because if we're picking stuff for a traditional method champagne, you want to pick it so there's maybe 10% potential alcohol, because you're going to add that tirage. That's going to add another 1 or 2% alcohol to it, and you'll end up with about 12, which is about as high as you want to go for this kind of wine. If you're doing a Prosecco, there's no tirage step. We'll talk about in a minute. So you pick it a little bit more ripe. Bring it in, you press it, same sort of ways, very gently. Anything you have to press hard gets sold off or thrown away or put in something else. It's only the light press that goes in. You ferment it, and then when it gets down to where there's a little bit 1 or 2% or whatever you want to do of sugar left, you essentially chill. You have this. Sorry, I should go back a step. I keep forgetting. They have special tanks which are very strong walled and can hold pressure. So our tanks are strong, but they cannot hold the pressure of a wine. They'd blow up. The special Prosecco tanks are double walled. I'm not sure exactly how they're made.
Super chilled. You can chill them.
And then and they have big cooling jackets, so they can let them go down to the sort of sugar one. They start chilling them, and they close them up. So the remaining fermentation, all those bubbles are trapped in the wine, and eventually it gets so cold that the yeasts can't, they go into sort of a suspended animation, and they can't ferment anymore. So you stop the fermentation by chilling, and you have those original bubbles from fermentation in there. And then you run the wine off. All the yeast will fall to the bottom. You run the wine off in a incredibly strong pressure hoses with pressure.
Super pressure,
yeah. And then you can, they're often aged in tank on that yeast for a while, or you can run it off immediately and bottle it right then, straight into a bottle as Prosecco. There are, what are they called? Pressure something bottling lines. I can't remember their names. But they're whole bottling lines meant to handle things with pressure, counter pressure. That's it.
Yeah.
So so that's traditionally the more industrial and sort of cheaper way to make things. It's not cheaper if you want to make a little bit, because
the equipment is very expensive. Yeah.
Super expensive.
Yeah. Even
Even the equipment to make a little bit is really expensive, but to make a lot is huge. So but if you want to make a lot, that is certainly an easy way. Cava is another popular one you'll see from Spain. It's made out of the Vera grape and a couple of those X grapes that I can never pronounce. Anyway, long ones. But that is actually made in the traditional champagne method. How in the world you can buy a Cava for $8 a bottle? I have no idea. But they do it. It does help for these wines that you can let your yields go a little bit higher So you get a little bit more juice out of each thing. So
Cremant.
Cremant
Cremant is
is,
made in the method champagne,
yeah,
but it's just
Cremant.
made somewhere else.
Yeah, it can't be called Champagne. It's not in Champagne, but you get Cremant de Alsace or from the Loire or Burgundy. There are lots of Cremants across France. There are lots of those wines all over. If you go, I've never had one, but apparently the Republic of Georgia makes some wonderful sparkling wines. Mostly used to be sold to Russia and now are sold all over the place, but I'd love to try some someday.
Oh, we can travel again.
Yeah, when we can travel again.
Right.
When we can lead a trip. When we can lead our trip to the to the Republic of Georgia. So and then there's one really minor method left, which is the one that the Chispa is, because
well, ours is I mean there is one other just like carbonation, which is not.
Oh yeah.
So I mean the really like if you see a really cheap bottle of sparkling wine, it's made like soda is made, where they like make the wine and then they carbonate it as they bottle it. But those are kind of rare. So the Chispa is not made that. Ours is basically the champagne method, but with a little variation because we kind of retrofit it.
Well, it's called the method ancienne, I believe it's called, the ancient method in France. I don't know. So. And so what it simply means, yeah, because I mean, so you pick the grapes ripe, you let them ferment. When you get to the point where you think when you calculate how much sugar is left and how much bubble that will create in the bottle, you literally bottle it straight out of tank. So it's fermenting when you bottle it, put it in the bottle, you put those crown caps on, your yeast, everything is in there. The wine is slightly bubbly, as it always is during fermentation, but mostly those bubbles are blowing off. Once you put it in the bottle and put the crown cap on, now it's going to finish fermenting in the bottle, and those bubbles are going to stay. The scary part is if you miscalculate how much sugar is left and you bottle it with a little too much sugar, yeah, you've created a whole bunch of bombs, and you put them in case boxes, right? So when one blows, it just blows all the ones around it. So or if you calculate too little, you end up with this kind of there's a little bit of a hint of spritz kind of wine. Yeah. So we actually had a few
if you
cases
see some of we have a few of those videos still lurking in the archives of us. So we did experiment with different lots where we stopped the fermentation at different places and then bottled a few to see to kind of test, because when we made this, we had been intending to make sparkling wine for a long time, but we hadn't in 17 we didn't decide that we were going to make this into sparkling wine kind of early. So what happened was we were picking Albarino, and we had one area we had a bigger crop than we expected. And we thought, this could actually be, it just seemed like it had the characteristics that would make a great sparkling wine. But it had too much sugar at that point to go through this double fermentation, because if we'd fermented it all the way dry and then added more sugar and then fermented it again, the alcohol would have been too high. It wouldn't have been balanced. So we kind of retroactively decided to make this method ancienne. I didn't even know there was a name for it. I thought it was like the Black Angle teacher method and inventing as they go, because it was sort of work. But anyway, so we ended up doing it that way. So then we had to kind of play around and guess like what would be the right level. And then we have some entertaining videos of us trying different ones and exploding in different levels of explosion.
I think if I remember right, we were lucky. We had a couple of blocks of Albarino that ripened early.
Yeah.
So we decided to take some of those and do the experiments on those while the main one was still fermenting.
Yeah.
And so we were able to try different sugar levels, let them ferment, and then try to make sure they didn't explode, and then see how much they blew out. And so
I feel like we chilled a few tanks so that we could let them wait.
Yeah.
So we could decide when we wanted to bottle them.
Yeah.
So I'm just muttering, but my recollection from 17 was that we had a couple different lots, and then we bottled some, and then we just chilled the tanks very, very cold so that the yeast like to operate kind of in a certain temperature range. So if you get them super cold, they won't necessarily stop, but they'll slow way down. So then that gave us time to let the fermentations finish and bottle, and then to play with what the pressures would be like. And you're dealing with some big pressures in these bottles. It's why the champagne bottles are so thick, you know, we are not so into heavy bottles, but the sparkling wine bottles have to be heavy because especially during that fermentation, you can have 6-7 atmospheres of pressure. You lose a couple of atmospheres of pressure when you open and re-cork. I think a regular bottled one is usually like 3 to 4 atmospheres, right? It's about like 3 or 4 times what natural pressure would be. So the first opening should be with a saver. If I had a saver, I would try it. But so you're dealing with a lot of pressure, and you have to, because you want some bubbles left after this whole disgorging and recorking process, and you do lose a lot when you open it. You have to have extra pressure in there in the beginning. So it is kind of a crazy how, and like so many things in life, how anyone invented this, I don't really understand. Yeah. Because it's great, but it's a very complicated process, and like how people, I guess they figure it out little by little, but yeah. So why do we pick Albarino? We actually had a relatively big crop of Albarino, and we were tasting it, and it just, something about it seemed reminiscent of sparkling wine, so we decided to give it a try.
And we had a couple in Spain.
We had some before that we liked, yeah. But it was more that we had the fruit, and we thought, oh, we could actually peel a little off and turn it into sparkling. We had originally planted Pinot Noir and Chardonnay with the thought of making sparkling wine in a more traditional way, but we
were idiots.
You know, now as we've described to you and briefly, kind of all the complexities of making it, we realized when we first started making wine that trying to do all of that would just be a distraction from learning how to make regular wine. We just realized it was too crazy. So it was a long time before we kind of had the guts to try it. And even then we bottled a bunch, and then we didn't have any way of doing that disgorging second step. So luckily we found a friend who was willing to help us out. It's a lot of work. You do it by hand. It took us a whole day with his equipment and 5 people and a ton of stuff just to flip the caps, you know. So you know, is a little bit of a commitment, I guess, to try to do it. So yes, we are going to make more. I hope. We're hoping to make more this year. One of the hindrances in making it all along has been not having enough white wines to take away. So we grow everything. So the only way we can make one wine is to not make some other wine. But so far this year feels like it's going to have yields that are good enough that we can siphon a little bit off. Our thought is to experiment again, because we love to do that. So our thought is that we will try some Viognier and some Gruner Veltliner this year to make our sparkling. So that's the plan. And we'll see how that goes. So that's what we're going to start with anyway.
And we were planning to do a little bit of Chardonnay too, but our Chardonnay yields are not.
They're small.
They're small. Yeah. They're okay, but they're not great this year. So whereas we have decent amount of GV and Viognier and Albarino for that matter. So we're gonna experiment with those. And I think I'm kind of excited about it. This time we sort of kind of know what we're doing, which is nice. And I hope we'll be able to do it every year from now on. We know we're going to have to make a big commitment, because making it in this way, the equipment is very expensive. It's very specialized to just sparkling wine.
Right.
And the whole process, not just the equipment, but all of the storage, and to make it the way we want to make it, we would like to have several vintages stored in tank so we can blend it before we do the final dosage and put it in things. If we can do that, sorry, Tiraj, if we can do all that, it takes a lot of space. So we'll have to build our new winery before we really can commit to all that. But that's the plan. So.
Yeah. I feel like I just had something about that. I can't remember. Well, I don't know.
While you're thinking of it.
Oh, so somebody asked about the glasses. So yes.
So here we go.
Experimenting.
We have 3 glasses. So these are traditional champagne.
Yeah.
So
they are the Riedel champagne glasses. Yeah.
We don't have champagne flute with us, which is the other traditional. Have you seen those very shallow flat ones?
This is the flute.
Everything.
Those are called
what are they called?
Trumpet or something.
Trumpet. Something. The other ones.
Other instrument. I don't know what they're called.
Our experience those is they let the bubbles go too fast, and they're not really what we want. We'd always thought that the one Sarah's drinking is the traditional glass. I saw a little video or webinar or something from Krug, the champagne maker, makes
They
it
also
super
make
fun.
really good champagne.
Yeah, they make it's okay. And they had this whole educational thing about how you should not drink out of one of those glasses. You should drink out of a regular white wine glass.
Yeah, yeah.
And I said no. So we've started trying, and I'm just doing this back and forth, and I kind of agree with them. I like it better out of this glass.
Yeah.
You get more, to me, that more of the yeasty, bready characters out of the nose of the wine, and it's a little more balanced in that glass. So
this is
good news.
this
You
is the
don't need separate
right,
glasses. Bring it out of the white wine glasses. So.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It works. Try it.
So.
What they say about the really shallow glasses is, yeah, they're kind of pretty and fun, but they don't. The bubbles just go. So
yeah.
you kind of lose that.
So kind of fun.
Yeah. Oh, so you've got somebody there making sparkling from Chenin and Muscat, and that sounds great. When are you coming up with all these wines, you guys? I know. I guess you can't fly anytime soon. Coop. Sean is feeding us the answers in the background. It's a coupe, that glass.
Yeah, Chenin Blanc is, boy, we would love to plant Chenin Blanc. That is, I don't know, we may have to try it someday. It's such a nice grape because it makes wonderful still wine. It makes fantastic dessert, sweet wines, and it makes really good sparkling wines. It's so versatile. It seems to be a little cold tender.
Meaning it may struggle through our winters.
Yeah, we have some good friends in Long Island that make wonderful Chenin Blanc, but they're very close to the bay there, and the winter temperatures don't get very low. So, and in Texas, I can imagine the winter temperatures don't get that low either. So, yeah, we should try some someday because I really do like the wines. They're nice. So.
It is, right? It is high on our list of wines we'd like to try. We just have to figure out winter, but winter is winter. Let's see. When can you come? I know. But I know. If only I knew. Are we able to get our wine to you in Texas now? We should be shipping. All right. I see you drinking something, but I can't see your bottle.
So there's a question about, we mentioned small bubbles. So we should talk about about our goals for this wine.
Right.
So we have goals for lots of our wines. What are we trying to accomplish with this wine, with any sparkling wine? And what we're trying to do, I guess, the small bubble thing is kind of interesting. It seems like a strange little thing, but the smaller the bubbles, the kind of lighter on the tongue the wine gets. And to me, a good sparkling wine is all about kind of floating around your mouth. It's just so light. There's no heaviness to it. And that's a really hard thing to do. And a big part of it, I think, is small bubbles. So
yeah. And that is one of the, I don't understand the science behind it very well, but one of the benefits of this whole ridiculous process that we described, where you have to bottle it and cap it and then unbottle it and then recap it and add, that helps to make the bubbles very small. Kind of the simpler the method of making it, the bigger the bubbles tend to be. And again, the coarser the wine seems to be.
Yeah.
So is why it's worth it to go through this whole crazy process, because it does make the bubbles a lot smaller and more delicate, and it just kind of lifts the whole wine, rather than being a little disjointed with like great big bubbles. And then as far as pairing, there's a bunch of questions about pairing. I mean, I am a fan of bubbles. I would drink it with everything. So I think 3 years ago, my New Year's resolution, I always have very good New Year's resolutions, and it was to drink more bubbles, right? Because who needs self-improvement? That's just overrated. Just do something fun. So we did a lot of experimenting, and we drank it with all kinds of stuff. And not all champagnes, like plenty of Prosecco and Cava and Cremants, and just trying everything. Mostly, I would say the traditional pairings are where you would drink white wines. So we are going to have, we're actually having chicken tonight with, what is it? It's like vaguely Indian sauce from Trader Joe's. I mean, I'm not really a chef, but it's like curry. Curry with curry. We're going to have it with curry. And it's, it'll hold up with like the acidity and it's not very spicy, but a little bit of spiciness. Those bubbles help to counteract some of that. So your traditional kind of seafoods and chickens, that kind of thing, for sure. But I think often with something with a little spice will work. And it can also cut through something that's like a little heavier, like a little bit of a richer sauce. Because again, partly the acidity and partly the bubbles, I think, just help to lighten something with, somebody's talking about Chinese food. Yes, like something that's going to have a rich sauce or maybe a little more depth.
I think a lot of Asian foods that with very complex flavors,
yes,
this just lifts and supports that, because champagne is mostly about feel. It's not mostly about flavor, so it doesn't interfere with those cuisines, whether it's Vietnamese or Chinese or Indian or Japanese, that have a ton of flavors in them. Sometimes a red or a white wine can conflict flavor-wise, and so these really work well with those kind of dishes. So
there you go.
So question with the method, NCN, do you also disgorge? Yes, if you don't disgorge, you get what's called a pet nat. So a wine that is just a pétillant naturel, I think it's called. And so you get a wine with some wonderful flavors, but the yeast is all through, it's cloudy and whatnot. We decided to disgorge and get rid of the cloudiness and make it a clearer, cleaner wine, which we prefer.
Yeah. I know I have more questions. So Phil has sent, but only to us, the meteorological explanation of why, but I can't explain it. So more condensation nuclei lead to more tiny droplets. The small bubbles result from more nuclei around which greater number of smaller bubbles can form. It is quite possible. We're going to have Phil do a whole explanation of that with clouds, it's basically in clouds, more condensation leads to like a whiter, fluffier cloud, and that could be the same idea with more bubbles. If I'm reading it right, Phil, you can correct me. The name Chispa, somebody asked, Chispa, Sean, why do we name it Chispa?
It's the Spanish word for spark. It's also just kind of a fun word that I feel like captures some of that like bubbly pizzazz when you say it.
Yeah. And Sean, whose idea was that name?
Mine. I think someone else also suggested it. There's kind of a joint credit going on, but I'm gonna, they're not here to defend themselves, so I'm gonna sort of claim their credit while I can.
Exactly. So it means spark like in a fire, not necessarily spark like this, but we felt like it was kind of the same idea. So
like still got that like sort of like that transience.
Yeah.
Like the bubbles pop and the sparks like appear briefly.
All right.
Great.
Great. And Michelle's going to write us a Physics Today article about it. We'll wait for the interpretation so we know what it means. That's great.
I think she said she could get an article, not write an article.
Oh, I thought you were going to write it for us.
Oh, Michelle, you're on. You're going to write it. And popcorn and chispa. That sounds good. I kind of like that. The lobster roll sounds fabulous. Whoever's got one, can you send one to me?
I know. I wanted my fresh OC.
Of course, I'll eat a lobster roll with anything. I don't care. But with bubbles would be great. Lobster and bubbles is actually.
It is a good combination. Yeah. So.
It's the bubble these bubbly wines cut. Yeah, well, they cut richness, which is a good thing. And so when you get a thing like lobster and butter, which is so rich, this kind of cuts through all that and balances it back up. So,
I mean, one of the things, and if you've followed us here, you've heard it before, but that's okay because we don't mind repeating ourselves. One of the reason that wine is, well, there used to be 4 food groups, so we call it the 5th. Now there's a pyramid and it's different. But anyway, one of the reasons that we think of wine as so important as like one of the food groups is that what it does is if you have a good pairing, the wine makes all your food taste better. And that's one of the reasons that a sparkling wine or a wine with a lot of acidity, it helps to literally clean out your mouth so that the next taste of something rich especially will taste good again. So when you're eating a lot of butter, the first bite is delicious. And then your mouth, like your taste receptors get kind of coated with it and you're losing some of the impact of it. But if you have a sip of wine, it clears all that off and then you can get the full impact with every bite. So it makes all of the, makes every bite as delicious as the first. That sounds like an ad campaign, but it just makes it all more and more, like more, you got more of the impact of what you're eating. So it's full, so do you recommend drinking it or should we let it age? I think it would be fine either way.
It's going to age beautifully. But again,
Yeah.
like a lot of our wines, it's meant to be drunk young, but it's going to age beautifully. So
Yeah, you can't go wrong. We won't ever release anything until we think it's ready to drink, but often it's like the beginning of when it would be ready, and then it can keep going for a long time. So I think it's fine. It's going to be a while before we have more because it takes a while to make. So our hope is that we'll have a great harvest this year. We'll be able to make a bunch, and then it'll be another year or two before we have more to bring back out. We don't have any in the pipeline. Like this is all of it that's made, and then we have to start over. So, but we'll get there.
Yeah.
So
there was a question about how has the year been for the new vines? We planted 42,000 new vines, I think, this year. Yikes!
Yeah.
Wow.
I know.
All by hand. That was a job. But it's done. They look beautiful. We had a very dry last month or so, 6 weeks or so.
In the beginning, but
yeah. So sorry if you
fine.
But we did have to do a little bit of watering. We probably could have gotten away without doing it, but if we'd known this last rain was coming, but since we didn't know it was coming, we had to start. It takes a while to water. So we did water, maybe half of those vines. And then we've got these nice rains, so now those vines are perfect. But they never really showed huge signs of water stress. We just wanted to make sure they were fine.
Yeah.
And, we're really, really happy with the new vines we planted this year. They really look good.
They seem great. They seem great. Jen, I see your comment about flavor compounds only soluble in alcohol. It's a good point, which I did not mention when I was talking about how wine refreshes your palate. But it's also that you will actually taste different things when you have wine than when you don't. So get different experiences as you go. Yeah,
that's pretty cool.
I know, that's super cool. Well, it's partly why we
that's great.
Why when we ferment, we like front load the skin contact and everything, because some compounds in winemaking also are much more soluble in alcohol than in water. So we want to front load our skin contact. We're going to talk about that next week. The 2020 vintage, my prediction, you'll be shocked to hear, is that it's going to be fantastic. Because that's always my prediction. But so far, the year is cooperating. So we are off to a great start. I think I mentioned in the beginning of the whole beginning of the season, really until almost the third week in August, is just like prelude. It's just kind of set up for the main event, which is the fall. And as is often the case in a lot of what we do, we can have guaranteed bad news, but not guaranteed good news until the very end. So the good news so far is we do not have bad news. So that's all very circular. I should be a lawyer. It's all very circular in my logic. But for sure, like so far, the setup has been great. Like we're in good shape so far. The beginning of the season has been great. You know, there is some chance that a hurricane parks off the coast, and 2011, we had a great setup, and then we had a crazy rain, and it rained for 3.5 weeks straight. Overall, because the beginning was good, the fruit was pretty ripe, the season was not a disaster, but it would have been awesome if we'd also had a great fall. So I can't predict a super fabulous year yet, but we should be pretty close. So every day that goes by and the weather is good is another probability that it'll be good.
And we feel really, I guess, thankful, lucky. I don't know what you choose your word. Many vineyards in Virginia and in Maryland got frosted really badly. We've heard people who lost 70% of their crop, 50% of their crop, 80% of their crop. And because we're up or higher, because we have our hills, because we had our little fans going, basically didn't lose anything. A little bit of Chardonnay, which is the first to come out. Part of the reason we have a lower crop, but very small. We basically dodged the whole thing, and now we've had this beautiful growing year. So
we are super lucky. It's true.
The worst is to have a frost, have no grapes, and then have a beautiful growing year, because it's so frustrating.
Yes. No, we're very lucky because we have a good crop out there, and a lot of people have lost so much fruit, and we've gotten lucky a bunch of years that it's partly the way we're set up in our vineyard, but it's also partly just the timing of where your grapes are when you get a frost. And we had a lot of really cold nights early on, but we were very lucky in how they turned out. So that's true. That's a good point. I think we're on to logistics time.
Logistics time.
So if you have more questions, keep them coming, but otherwise I'm going to go through some logistics. So first, can you make Amanda and Kaylee like show, or Christina? I don't know, Zoe, how powerful you are, but we have a few staff. She's very powerful. We have a few staff shift around that I just wanted to announce. So one is that Christina is shifting to a different role. So she is going to be focused less in time in the tasting room and more on kind of marketing and our social media presence and all that. So don't worry if she's your account manager for Wine Club. She's keeping all of her counts. You'll still get to see her. She'll still be in the tasting room some, but less. We're just going to shift her schedule around, and she's going to be taking on much more of a kind of a marketing role. So when you find yourself just like buying all this Black Ankle wine that you had no intention of buying, you're not really sure like why you place this huge order, it's going to be because Christina set you up. So I'm just telling you right now, watch that space. And we are also excited that Kaylee, who many of you know, is going to be moving into a full-time role. So you'll see more and more of her in the tasting room and kind of managing tasting room operations. So she has been spending a lot of time working in the host stand. So many people will have seen her already, but if not, and then we're bringing on a whole new person. So Amanda, I don't know, I don't see her on my screen. Are you on? Turn yourself on if you're not, anyway. Wave, there you go, wave, I can see you now. So she's coming on board. I think today was officially your first day, right? So you're getting a trial by fire here, but you'll see more and more of her in the tasting room. So we're excited to have her come aboard. And those are the big kind of staff changes going on. So all good news as far as we're concerned. We're really excited about that. And for all of you who have been coming out, you'll know that we are, we're making it all work with kind of the brave new world that we're living in. We're going, 100% reservations. We have all of our outdoor space. I think we poured the steps for the upper terrace this week. I know we did. One step's poured, the other step's ready on deck. So we are very close to officially finished with the whole outdoor expansion project. So that has been very exciting for us. So we are, we're open, we're doing all reservations. I will say, the best way to get a reservation is go online, try your luck, see what you find. If you do not get a reservation and you want to come, we save some secret reservations for our Wine Club members. So just reach out to us. If you get there and it looks full, send a note to your account manager if you know who that is. If you don't, no problem. You can reach out to Melissa or Zoe or Amanda or Kaylee or anybody in us, info@Black Ankle, tell us your date. It would be a rare circumstance that we couldn't find a way to squeeze you in. So we want to make sure we have space for all of you guys. And we do set a little aside that's not officially available online for reservations so that we can do that. And if you're not ready to come out, if you're still nervous about quarantining, fair enough. We're still doing deliveries, we're doing shipments, whatever we can do. We really do want to try to just make sure that everybody is, feels comfortable and safe and can enjoy the wines wherever works best. So that is the logistics on that. I think for this Saturday is second Saturday. So where's Rick? You're going to be happy because it's Brick and Fire Pizza, which I know is your favorite. They're going to be here this Saturday night. And I think Eamon Curley is playing. I know we had officially sold out of reservations at some point, but I think we have, because we've expanded our space, we've opened some more up. So if you're interested in coming out on Saturday, we should have some space available. Did I miss any of my logistics? I feel like I covered them. Oh, we still do curbside pickup too. So if you want to come out just to have like a little bit of an outing, but you don't want to sit, actually come all the way out. You can get to the corner and text the tasting room number. We have the number even written on a whiteboard when you get there or on a chalkboard, and somebody will run your wine out to you. So we're going to do our best. And our thought is that we're going to try to keep doing these happy hours. The plan for now is to try to do like one a month, so that we can keep up with life, but also not totally lose track of all of this. So the next one is scheduled for Thursday. I think it's September 3rd. We're gonna push back to 5:30. I think that might, just in case anyone has to actually go to work. maybe 5:30 is easier to get home for. So the plan is the 3rd of September at 5:30 for our next one. We might be here. We may have harvest updates by then. We should have picked some things. We'll know a lot more about what the year is going to look like. The plan then is to talk about crumbling rock. So we have just snuck out the 2017 crumbling rock. I think many of you probably got an email saying, if you want a sneak preview, you can get it. We, if you do find yourself at the tasting room, we're occasionally, we can't do official tastings, but we could bring a glass around every once in a while. So it's a possibility that you get to have a little taste of what it's like. But we're going to talk about the 17 crumbling rocks in general, whatever questions people come up with, of course. And then we'll have a big update on what's going on with harvest and what, because this next month, the next 6 to 8 weeks really are the key to what the season's going to bring. So, oh, and you can add crumbling rock to your flight. You're right. So, anything else? Did I miss anything? Did I miss anything?
It's gonna be fun talking about the 17 crumbling rock.
Yeah, 17 was so good. 17 was so good. It was a good year. So I see the storm clouds rolling into Silver Spring. I don't know where they are anywhere else, but the skies are blackening. So I think maybe we'll be happy that we survived with power and Wi-Fi and everything through our full hour and sign off. So great to see everybody. Thank you to so many of you guys for checking back in. And
all right, thanks, guys.
We'll see everybody in a month, if not before. Take care. Bye. Cheers. Bye-bye. Right. Cheers.
Cheers.
I got you. Cheers.
You gotta drink both.
I have to drink them both.
Like a walrus.
That's good. That's
the drinking really walrus.
The drinking walrus. I'll try. I know. Not gonna
come
happen.
on. Come on.
Not on video.
We got it on video.
Not on video.
You run for office someday.
Right, exactly. I swear I'm a very serious person.
All right. I snapped that picture too.